Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this LinkedIn live. First of all, apologies for the technical challenges we had to start the session on time, but here we are on this session that is all about the time to transform exceptions and investigations. My name is Sebastian Rojas. I'm part of the Swift team, and I'm leading our payment products at Swift. And it's a great pleasure to have Isabel Bowie from Bank of New York. She's director and principal product manager and Bank of New York. Isabel, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you.
Very good. So this session, as I mentioned, is aiming to give you a snapshot of 30 minutes on what we are doing with Swift and the community to transform investigations. We have a plan of 3 years to do a revolution on removing friction on payments, and we'll be talking about that during this session. You are welcome to enter your questions at any time during the session. We will still take some time at the end of the session with Isabel to answer the questions that we can in the time that we have allocated for that. So let's get started, and let's start talking about the payment revolution. I think if we look at payments over the last years, I think that is not a secret, the revolution that we are seeing: new players, new channels, and most importantly, a better customer experience and better payments, faster payments. When we look only at Swift, 50% of payments are completed in seconds, and our average would go maximum to 5 minutes in completion. And we know that payments typically maximum will take 1 day. About 80% of payments are completing within the day. However, when we look at this 20%, this last mile of payments, is not necessarily a technology question, is not necessarily a change of channel, or not necessarily about what is happening with the payment content itself, but it's all about what are the different impacts or the different challenges that banks face in the context of cross-border payments, moving money from one country to another country, right? And these include local regulation. We know that many countries have currency controls that require documents to prove the payment, that require documentation about the parties that are sending those payments, as an example. And those are things that are here to stay for quite some time. We also know that banks, they have obligations with regards to compliance and transaction filtering. And we know that this also can occur on delays whenever there is any suspicion on a compliance perspective related to a payment. We know that errors happen, and we know that our users, even though we give them the best front ends, the best applications, the best user interfaces, mistakes happen. And entering a wrong account number, entering wrong information about clearing codes, etc., can still represent friction in the payment. And this friction can conduct to beneficiary claims, and disputes that will only delay the supply chain process. And last but not least, and I think is one of these increasing challenges that banks and users overall are experiencing over the last years, is the increase of fraud. If we look only in the US last year, we have seen an increase of 25% of fraud, and this represents more than 12 billion USD for the community. So it's a very important challenge that banks are facing today. And in this, you want to be fast, you want to be efficient, and you want to be able to stop payments immediately. And this is all about solving this friction that we still have on payments. And this is what we are doing at Swift over the last 2 years. We recently published a paper that is looking at the friction, that is looking at exceptions and investigations. We didn't do that alone. We work with 31 financial institutions, including Bank of New York. And Isabel was one of I would say, our champions, helping us to develop this research. And this research was looking not only at the causes of investigations that I already gave you a quick snapshot, but it was also looking at the key challenges for banks to automate, the key challenges for banks to come with efficient processes to solve these problems. And in a way, we're looking at how this not only implies operational challenges, but also customer dissatisfaction. And we see that also on the NPS surveys of customers that are questioning, or they are looking into potentially changing banks when they have a customer experience that is not what is expected. So in this session, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about what can you do as a financial institution, what can you do as a application vendor provider, or as a consultant on payments, to improve the experience of customers and be able to unlock opportunities for banks. So I gave already I would say, a very high level context, Isabel, but let's talk about the real world, and how you see from a bank perspective the challenges that I was mentioning. And can you tell us a few of the examples that you hear from your peers or that you see in your bank as well?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sebastian, for having me together with you today. So, indeed, the investigation handling that and relating costs, complexity, and challenges have been there for so long already. Yeah, perhaps even well before the introduction of the FinMT messages for payments back in the 70s. There were some attempts in the past, like 20 years ago, I remember we created the first set of exception and investigation messages in the ISO format, but those were never kind of very successful, never attracted some appetite from the banks to be used. And the reasons being that, I mean, these messages were already created in ISO 2022, while the FinMT messages for payments were still, the ones that were used. We didn't have any transaction manager at the time. We didn't have the case manager. We didn't have GPI. And actually, that explains the reason why it really never picked up. But the situation has changed, has evolved. And this is what this session is going to be about, convincing everyone that actually the new exception investigation set of messages are going to be extremely successful and useful for all of us in the banks. So yes, you're asking me for a few examples. Actually, there are so many that create exception handlings in the banks that I had to pick just a few. And for example, in a case of a beneficiary claim non-received, whenever we receive a question from the debtor agent, very often, I mean, we are an intermediary bank, as you know, and of course, the payment has left the bank already. So meaning that we have to forward the investigation to the next bank in the payment chain, and that takes time. Also, what we are seeing is that very often we receive MT199s or 299s, and unfortunately, they're missing key information that would allow a smooth resolution of an investigation, such as missing key references. And very often as well, these MT199 are not clear, meaning that we have to create investigations on investigations. We also sometimes receive reminders, I mean, for investigations that we have not yet received and these types of things. So I think that looking at all of this and all the work that is done by the operations team, I would like to personally thank my own operations team for all of the work they're doing, because honestly, you need to be extremely patient. But at the end, I mean, speaking with other banks, I see and we realize that we are all facing the same challenges. That is, we are faced with lots of manual processes today and with very long resolution time. The reason being that, we having to exchange those exchange messages point to point in the payment chain. There are lots of duplication of efforts whenever you receive a CCNR, a beneficiary claim non-received message, and unable to apply at the same time. Poorly formatted messages, text messages that we're trying desperately to, get rid of. And we also have no end-to-end view of where the investigation is standing. Actually, if you look at the ISO world today, and everyone knows I'm really passionate about this ISO world. If you look at ISO today, it's like a big puzzle. Yeah, you have all these pieces. Pieces can be the base messages, they can be the usage guideline, they can be the transaction manager, they can be the usage guideline, the validation rules, and so and so. And I'm pretty sure we all know that feeling that sometimes you kind of doing a puzzle and there's missing one piece, and that one piece really drives you crazy. You think you have that impression of incompleteness. Well, this is what case management that we're going to elaborate on is. I mean, this is in the ISO world of today, the missing piece.
This is very good, Isabel, and I will quote one of our peers from one of these big customer management systems in Cybos in Beijing last year, where they were saying that the exceptions are like love letters, right? That you really need to read from the beginning to the end to understand what is the intention of the letter. Is a date, or something more, and it means that in operations you need to have people opening these letters every day and trying to figure out which team needs to follow up on this. Is it the compliance team? Is the
Yeah.
operations team? And understand what happened with the payment. And I think you touch a point that is actually quite important. That is ISO 20022. We are in the middle of a transformation. It's a transformation that on Swift is about to be completed in the payment space in November, but we know that it's a transformation that goes beyond a network and goes also into domestic systems. And we were discussing, Isabel, about the deadline on Fedwire for 14 July. And we are all busy ensuring that our systems, they do ISO 20022. But a question that comes very often is, when are we going to start seeing actual benefits and actual return on investment of those ISO, I would say, investments that all banks and SWIFT is doing to ensure that the community step up on data structure and data richness. So I think when we talk about exceptions, this structured data and rich data is really a unique opportunity, right? I think this is the opportunity to bring consistency, to bring efficiency in the processes and optimize the processes ultimately. And I believe this is probably the first capability that will bring direct return on investment for banks. Return on investment that is direct and that is measurable by the fact that you would be able to see what is happening for your customer satisfaction. You will also see the resolution time, etc. So on Swift, we have defined a 3-year transformation plan for exceptions. As you know, November is the deadline for payments on ISO 20022 on Swift. And then we have 3 years to ensure that we do transform exceptions and investigations. And how we want to do that is introducing a new market practice that we've been developing with a set of banks representing multiple countries, a set of experts on exceptions and payment operations. And we don't want to stop with market practices, what means what Isabel was mentioning, exchanging messages left and right, but we want to really eliminate the inefficiencies of the daisy chain that we see today, passing information between banks, between each other, without necessarily knowing what type of inquiry, without necessarily knowing what is the information that is available. So in order to achieve that, we created a pilot group. 31 banks were sitting around the table trying to solve this important challenge. We have developed a new capability that is called case management, and we've been if you want, piloting this over the last months. Bank of New York is one of those banks that are leading in the industry the introduction of this case management system. And for us, is piloting, building with the community is one of the things that we do the best, we believe, and is something that keep us consistent in the industry. Isabel, you were part of that pilot. Tell us a little bit more about what we did with your, I would say, your peers in defining these new exceptions and investigations and this new centralized process with case management.
Yeah. Well, actually, when we heard about the intention from Swift to develop such a product, of course, and for the reasons that I explained in my introduction, we were kind of believing that this was the way to go. And that's the reason why we were from the very start very much involved with Swift and with the other pilot banks in the discussions on, how to develop this product and make it efficient. So as a Swift member, as an intermediary, because I think that as an intermediary bank, we are actually very much impacted by the number of investigations. We wanted to contribute, and we involved internally to the bank the various lines of business that are having to deal with these investigations. So I'm referring to the operations team, I'm talking about the liquidity teams, I'm talking about the compliance, for example, or a legal team. So everyone, and we meet on a regular basis to discuss the requirements, making sure that what we're going to develop is something that we're going to be able to use. So beyond that, we wanted to make sure that, the requirements that we were going to come to the table with was requirements from the community as such, but also for our clients. We take it very personally that, and very importantly, that actually the requirements of our clients, the issues that they are being faced with, would be looked into as well, and not just look at the needs of big global banks. We want to gain in efficiency, that's definite, and we want to improve the STP and for the whole end-to-end payment chain. We want to decrease the manual workarounds that we have in place. And at the end of the day, what we would like to achieve, and I think this is what the pilot was all about, is making sure that we all agree on the common use cases, on the common flows, on the common data that would be required to have an end-to-end processing that is going to be STP, and that at the end of the day, we're all playing the same game.
Very good, Isabel. And I think when we look at the ISO migration and introduction of the standards and structured data, this will automatically elevate the conversation between banks, being able to route messages, being able to answer to concrete specific questions, automate what is one of the biggest challenges that we see today. But we knew as well that just enabling the pass through of messages in the context of investigation was not enough. So we really introduced this central capability called case management that we are extending, by the way, to the entire Swift community. And this capability, what it does is that it integrates all the different pieces of the puzzle that that Isabel was talking about before. When we look at, for instance, the payments tracker. So as you know, with GPI, now we have the possibility to know where the payment is. So if you have an inquiry regarding the status of a payment, what about we integrate tracking data into the exception engine, meaning that there's no investigation created? We can simply auto reply to potential inquiries from customers, telling them what is the status of a payment, hopefully the completion of that payment. We also integrate with the underlying payment data, meaning that our operators, instead of having to go to 20 screens to try to figure out the information related to the payment, they can consolidate the inquiry with the payment directly in their terminal and in their application that the bank is using. We introduce smart workflows. So we know that there are transactions and inquiries that don't require the participation of multiple banks, but we can go directly to the bank that is requiring to take an action. And I think when we talk about stopping transactions, we covered fraud earlier, and stopping transactions is extremely important. So imagine if you have to chase a payment after all intermediaries or all banks that are participating in a transaction. This is a process that is going to take time, is going to be risky. So those smart workflows introduce the possibility to stop a payment directly on the Swift network and inform the bank that is expecting to process that payment that this payment is in a cancellation queue. Isabel was talking about reminders, and we all know reminders. And the problem with exceptions is that reminders keep coming even if the exception is already solved. So what the system allow is to really automate reminders, ensure that we have auto responses, that we remind the banks whenever the answer to an inquiry is not there, without removing the need for operators to start following up and chasing on existing cases. And most importantly, and I think when we bring the customer satisfaction angle, is the possibility to be able to tell to our client what is happening with the investigation. What today is probably one of those largest or biggest question marks that we see. Now, if we look at the benefits that we see, that Isabel, I don't know if you want to add on this.
No, I think you covered it all. I mean, I think that the benefits today, if we look at all these puzzle pieces being together, I think that yes, this is going to make a big difference for the banking community, definitely, and the corporates, we would hope, in the future as well. Yeah.
Yes, that's precisely right. So as I mentioned earlier, we have worked on developing a white paper together with the community to identify what are the wins, or how we can factually assess the return on investment of ISO 20022, and more particularly when we look at exceptions. So we see that with this new system, we can reduce investigations up to 80% of investigation time, understanding that today an investigation might be, if you want, 15 operators might be looking in one single investigation. So I think it's a big improvement here. We're also looking at the cost that we could save per investigation, and we know investigations are costly, and in many occasions the banks are absorbing some of this cost. So this cost is not necessarily exposed to intermediary banks or to the parties, they ultimately the customers. So all this is if you want, ending in liquidity that is impacted on the bank. So we see that there is about 600 million saving per year for banks doing this optimization. And of course, one big part of this is operations, but there's also hidden cost that we don't necessarily see. And this is really looking at the liquidity. This is looking at the cost of running investigations that we are not charging back to intermediaries or to the customer. And also, very important, the compensations, right? If the payment is not there in time, there are compensations that are due in many occasions to our customers. And those are making, I think, this big lump sum of 600 million that are possible to be achieved, if you want, in a yearly basis for banks, just optimizing how to address exceptions and investigations. Maybe what I would like just to stress, and I think, Isabel, when we were discussing before this session, it was one of the points that you mentioned we really wanted to stress, is the fact that we are over a transformation plan. 27 is the deadline for the Swift community to use case management for exceptions an investigation. So we have already started. As I mentioned, we have already 30 banks that are live on this new system, and we're expecting 120 banks by the end of the year. And we have different implementation options. So if you are using a more integrated, complex case management system like Pega, like FIS, Siracom, Balantec, we have APIs, we have messages and standards that enable integration in your systems. But if you are looking more at manual operations and manual exception handling, being in a different entity of your bank or being on your bank on its own, we have also developed a user interface that is extremely simple to use and that allow you to grab the benefits of both ISO 20022 and the case management orchestration without necessarily having to invest. Basically, your operators will log in this GUI and would be able to interact with any bank using the latest standards. So time is kicking. So 2027 is the deadline, and I think it should not wait too long, right, Isabel?
Correct. I think that considering that we have this deadline for the CBPR plus payment messages in November 2025, we should not, forget that there are other initiatives that are coming up, such as this one. And especially from November 2026, there will be this obligation to already receive the CAMP 110, CAMP 111, these ISO 2022 messages. If you're not able to digest the fully fledged ISO, you can continue. You can receive the multi-format a little bit like we have today as a functionality for the PAX 8 and PAX 10, and we need to prepare for that. That is why when we joined the pilot group, we wanted at BNY to be able to also. That's one of the advantages of joining this pilot group is to be able to capture information, provide, of course, our feedback, but also capture information that can be transmitted to our clients. So I think that for the bigger bank, this is an opportunity to have this dialogue with your clients, explaining what is coming up and making sure that everyone is at least today aware. Yeah. So, and I must say that Swift has done a great job in building a series of trainings on the Swift.com website. So something that definitely we are encouraging. Our peer banks and also our clients to consult. So yes, as you said, time passes by very fast. So let's make sure that we at least know what this project is about, how much value it's going to bring, because it will definitely bring lots of value, and also start planning, developments, training. I think training is key. These types of projects, discussion, dialogue with internal lines of business, such as operations. It's very important to include them as well. So yes, that would be the recommendation. Even though November 2027 seems far away, it's gonna be there, in no time. Yeah.
Yeah, fully right. And if we look at 27, Isabel, what are you waiting the most for? So what if you look at the future, how the future looks like with these new investigations and case management?
Yeah. Well, I think that the solution that we are building today for the top case use cases such as beneficiary claims not received, UTAP, unable to apply. These are the first cases. That we are implementing. We are about to test the RQFI, request for information, compliance, sanctions, and unable to execute. I think that with this in place, we will have a nice portfolio of investigations that will actually cover all of our requirements. Now, of course, I would already like to go a step further. We're talking here about the CBPR plus community. We know that, very often the payment, chain goes through an MILEX. So we would have liked actually to include the market infrastructures in those discussions, making sure that at least, these investigation handling messages could transit through the market infrastructure without too much efforts for the direct participants into this market infrastructure. And I think I already touched upon a little bit earlier. And we know that we have this initiative of including corporates. Yeah. So I think that including corporates as well for usage of some of these exception handling messages would be something that we value. I think that is going to be valuable for the banks and the corporates themselves. And then, of course, perhaps adding some more functionality, a little bit like what we are looking into now for the RQFI, where we would have a module of a distributed model where actually investigations could go out simultaneously to several agents in the payment chain, making sure that actually you get the information that you require in a faster manner. So this is really what I would have liked to ask Swift to look into in the future.
Very good. Thanks, Isabel. And I think we have reached the mark of our 30-minute speech. And I see that in the meantime, we have quite a few questions that are coming from the audience. So maybe let's start answering some of the questions. And in a moment after we answer a couple of questions, we're going to share with you a QR code that will allow you to download the paper we've been talking about that summarize the points that Isabel brought here. As I mentioned, we work with 31 banks, so it gives us really a large perspective on how this is a challenge that is not limited to one region or one country, but it's really a global challenge that we're seeing in the context of cross-border. So Isabella, I think the first question is for you because he's asking about what are the key differences between the existing usage of MT199, 299s in the context of exceptions and investigations versus what ISO is delivering, right? So I wonder if you can summarize with a few points what concretely we're talking about. And I think the second question for me is a little bit more difficult. That is what Swift is doing to encourage the community to move away of those 199s. But I'll
Yeah,
let you
yeah.
start with the first question, Isabel.
Yeah, first of all, compared with the MT, I think we cannot even compare what a 199 does and what a CAMT 110 or CAMT 111 would do. You're going to have actually, first of all, I think the beauty is that you're going to have an harmonized format with, I mean, the CBPR plus payment messages, meaning that from a structural point of view, from a principle point of view, from a naming convention point of view, from many point of view, I mean, they're fully aligned. So I always say, if I say that to everybody, if you know a PAX 8 by heart, I mean, you know all of the other messages, and I think it applies as well to the ISO CAMT 110, CAMT 111 messages. It's also, so this means that it's very well structured, and it also includes a lot of coded information. Currently, we have one specification per use case, so this is quite straightforward. This means that for the operations teams, when they're going to be faced with this CAM 110, CAM 111, most of the information is already pre-filled, either through the case manager, transaction manager. Lots of information is already pre-filled, which is going to be a gain of time, of course, for these operations teams, but also will make sure of the quality of the investigation, making sure that, I mean, the recipient, and I would like also, perhaps we've missed this one, Sebastian, and it's an important one, that the exchange, I mean, of these exception handling messages are done through one single BIC, which is the case manager BIC. So it means that for the operations team, they don't have to search into their directories to touch actually a certain bank in the payment chain. They will send the the investigation to the case manager using the case manager BIC, and the case manager will orchestrate everything for us. So I think this is also one of the advantages. So yes, compared to the 199, it's true the message might be more complex, but it's built in a way that actually it can be completely automated, and there is no space for misinterpretation any longer.
And this is the place where the integration in the CMS systems of the banks or the usage of the GUI plays an important role because ultimately the operator will not be confronted with a message. That is what we see today with the usage of MT199s or even emails, right? It's not confronted with a narrative starting from scratch, but it's starting from a template that is pre-filled with information associated to that payment, which will ultimately make the life easier for the operators. And I think that answer slightly the question about what we're doing to move the community away of MT199s. I think if you give an operator an MT199 message where They need to go to different screens to capture the information. They need to send more 199s to get context on that investigation, just to be able to answer, to send to one bank that will send to the other one, and so on and so forth, compared to an operator that can have everything in a single screen and hopefully get an automated reply, being able to close the case in seconds. I think that's a very important factor. It's not only the lighting factor on the end customer, but it's also the lighting factor for your own operation teams in how you provide and empower your team with efficient tools to be able to deal with those investigations. So what we're doing at Swift is not only about proving the value, proving the return of this move into 199, but it's a move that is mandatory. So as per November 2027, the usage of NT199 and similar messages will not be supported anymore for exceptions and investigations. So it's not a question if, it's a question of when. 27 is the deadline, and this includes, as Isabel mentioned, some of work on also doing change management in your own organization, ensuring that your operators are aware and they understand how the new processes will work for Swift transactions, and also transactions that don't go necessarily on Swift, like domestic markets, as Isabel was rightly mentioned. There is also a question about data quality. So we focus on ISO a lot, and we say it's a structure. Data quality is better, easier handling and routing within the bank. But the question is about are the inquiries related only to data quality? Meaning that if we improve the data quality with confirmation of payee and these new capabilities that are coming out, are we going to remove completely investigations? I would like just to come back maybe to the introduction I did. We know that investigations, they don't necessarily come only for data quality challenges. They also come from the regulatory requirements, needing, as an example, a copy of a passport, needing a copy of an invoice, understanding what is the purpose of payment. And those are elements that you typically will not include in a payment, but it's something that you will require based on a specific regulation, specific places where you are traveling with your payment, right? And it's a misunderstanding that we hear quite often, understanding or thinking that changing technology will remove those barriers. But it's not because you have a fast track in the airport to enter into a country that you don't need to scan your passport, right? So their regulatory controls are still to stay, and we believe it's important to embed these capabilities not only on Swift rails but also on different alternative rails that are coming up, because regulation is going to be there to stay. Cancellation of payments is not always about quality in the payment. Could be fraud attempts, could be double payments, and those are also use cases as an example on when we see that exceptions are not necessarily only related to data quality. Data quality will help us. That's for sure. Trying to reduce the number of investigations that we have. I don't know, Isabel, anything to add on this?
No, perhaps a few words, as I guess we are reaching the end of the session. Actually, I do realize, and I see that on my daily, on my daily work, is that there is still a lot of skepticism on ISO 20022, not only on case management, but also for the CBPR plus payment messages. But this is not going to go away. You know? This is, I mean, we will have to jump onto the train and make sure that we are compliant at all stages. I think that, as you mentioned, Sebastian, clearly, I mean, this is mandatory. It's mandatory for every bank connected on SWIFT. We will have to go through the CBPR plus instructions. We're going to have to go through the case management, and there is skepticism. But I am convinced that in a few years' time, whenever, I mean, CBPR Plus will be fully implemented, when case management will be fully implemented with the tools that are provided by SWIFT, such as the transaction manager that actually does some data integrity validation, I mean, additional validation, more structured data, that this is when today, it's true, we don't really see the benefits, we don't really see the return on investment, but this will come. I mean, once the corporates are going to be onboarded as well, and the market infrastructures, I think that when we're going to have the end-to-end payment chain on ISO 20022, the whole chain, plus investigation, case management onboarded as well, I think this is where we'll be able to say, wow, we did the right thing when we started discussing ISO 20022. So hang in there. It's gonna happen. I'm pretty sure in a few years' time, I'm pretty sure we'll all be glad that we went through that difficult time.
Very good, Isabel. Thank you for your passion on this, for all the efforts to help us to move the community. Here's the QR code. If you scan this QR code, you would be able to download our white paper. You will be able to unlock opportunities, improving your processes, and in the meantime, helping your customers to have frictionless payments. If you are interested to join this group of early adopters, as I mentioned, we have 130 banks representing roughly 40% of the global E&I traffic on Swift that are expected to go live by the end of the year. 30 are already live. So just contact us. You feel free to reach out to your Swift representative or send us a message. We're happy to follow up and bring you on board. Swift has quite a lot of incentives to facilitate the journey to go live. So, Isabel, one more time, thank you very much, and we
Thank
hope to see many of you implementing these great new capabilities. Have a great day. Thank you.
you, everyone. Bye.